is just not safe, and you don't want those people operating on you or taking care of you in the hospital. Dr. Ali Rodriguez, aka Ali Rod MD, quit her job as an OB-GYN. Let's find out why.
I quit my job as an OB/GYN in private practice. I'm going to quickly explain what it means to work in private practice. As a doctor, you have many different options as to what you can do with your career, whether that's a hospitalist, joining a private practice, starting your own practice, whatever it may be.
We actually have a video on Med School Insiders covering the main types of practice settings for practicing doctors. So academic, community, and private practice. Not an exhaustive list, but we give you a really good overview. Check it out right up here.
Working in private practice means that you work in an office setting. You have your own private patients that are assigned to you. You see these patients in an office setting.
Now, the reason it's called private practice is not because of, it's an office setting versus operating room. It's more because in a private practice, generally the doctors who are running the practice are owning it. It's not owned by the government. It's not owned by a larger hospital entity. That's why it's called a private practice. And if you set up shop as yourself, as, hey, this is my, I'm the only doctor here, or maybe me and one other person, that's a private practice. She joined a group that had 7 physicians. And there can be larger private practice groups as well. So there's a lot of variety within private practice.
As a private practice, you also have a contract with a hospital. Some private practices have contracts with multiple hospitals in their city. In my case, we had a contract with one hospital where...
It's gonna vary based on the specialty, but it's very common for private practices to have contracts with larger hospitals, university centers, etc. That's a big way in how you actually get patients on your census. So how do you get new patients? You go to a hospital, you treat the patient in the inpatient setting, meaning they're admitted to the hospital. And again, this varies based on the specialty. Not all private practices do this, but it is common.
Reason number one why I left my job was my schedule. The practice I joined was a little bit different because yes, we were a private practice, but then we also served as the hospitalist of the hospital we had a contract with. What the heck is a hospitalist? Now, there are many different types of hospitalists that you can find in a hospital, whether that's in internal medicine, as an OB/GYN, multiple different specialties can have a hospital. So for us specifically, we were the OB hospitalists at this hospital. That means any sort of patient that would come into the hospital that was a no-doc patient, meaning their doctor didn't come to that hospital to deliver. Maybe they didn't have any prenatal care throughout their pregnancy. They came in precipitously delivering. We were the doctor on call to take care of those patients.
As Ali mentioned, you can be a hospitalist in a variety of specialties. So if you're an internal medicine hospitalist, then you're treating the patients admitted to the hospital on the internal medicine service and following up with them, eventually discharging them, and so on. And that's of course gonna look different if you're an OB/GYN versus an orthopedic surgeon versus a gastroenterologist and so on. But the key thing is that you're treating patients in the hospital.
Our shifts when we were on call were very, very busy. When we worked our call shifts, our structure was doing 24-hour call shifts. It wasn't always like this, but about 8 months into my job, they decided to make the change to 24-hour shifts, and I hated it. Before that, we would do 12-hour shifts, which I thought was manageable and a little bit more reasonable because these 24-hour shifts, we were in-house, meaning we could not leave the hospital because on labor and delivery, if someone comes in precipitous delivering, if there's an emergency, which can happen like that on labor and delivery, there had to be a doctor in-house 24/7.
So when she's saying in-house, she means actually in the hospital so that you can be summoned, you can help the patient very quickly. Whereas home call is when you can go to your own home and sleep, and then they'll page you in the middle of the night, you hop out of bed, get in your car, and drive over to the hospital. So very different. And I do also wanna just use this opportunity to say that not all private practices are like this. You are seeing more and more private practices get brought up by private equity, and it's a cash grab, it's about profit, it's about turning these things over and investors getting a return on their money. So the story you hear about practices transitioning from having 12-hour shifts to then 24-hour shifts and working their doctors harder and harder and people burning out is unfortunately very common right now.
So during the span of those 24 hours, I was not sleeping. It would be very rare if I actually had a shift where I could sleep for more than 3 or 4 hours. But then over time, working 24 hours after 24 hours after 24 hours, and you're not sleeping, that's going to catch up to you, and it really, really affects how you feel, how you react, and it was not good. Now, as an attending in private practice, you are alone, which is fine. I was trained for this and I was prepared. It's not like I was nervous in that sense, but it does tend to become very lonely and also very hard. The loneliness aspect of it then starts to also play into your mental health when you're running on 23 hours of no sleep.
While you do have colleagues in private practice who are fellow attendings, it's not the same as when you have a team, like a vertically stacked team of attending, senior resident, junior resident, etc., on a single service. So that's where you're getting that loneliness.
Also had an Aura ring, and the Aura ring, right, monitors your sleep. It predicts like how your energy and your mood levels are gonna be and all that stuff.
Aura rings are fantastic sleep trackers. We actually have a whole playlist on the Aura ring right up here.
My Aura ring during one of those shifts and then seeing my stats and my numbers afterward were kind of like a wake-up call and a reality check for me. I'm not lying when I tell you, coming home after a 24-hour shift, it was not me. I was a different person. You can ask my husband, you can ask my family about it. I was not the same person. I was extremely exhausted. I was very sad. I was very negative about myself. This is making me emotional. But I was a completely different person. Even when I would come home, I would pass out immediately and sleep till about 2 or 3 p.m. You're still off because you're sleeping during the daytime. I was off that day, so I had 24 hours to recover. But honestly, the worst part of it is that after that 24-hour recovery day off, I had to be back in the office or back during surgery or back for another 24-hour shift.
So she clearly sounds like she was burning out, and I don't blame her. That's a very challenging lifestyle that she was leading. And I know that a lot of viewers of this channel are, early 20s around that time and, deciding whether or not to go to med school. And I know when I was in my early 20s, I was like, dude, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Who needs sleep? And I could run on fumes pretty easily. I think a lot of young people can because your bodies are just so resilient. She finished residency in 2020. So most attendings, once they've completed their residency training, they're late 20s all the way up to maybe like mid 30s on average. And I'm 33, and I can just say that the ability to tolerate low sleep is so much reduced at 33 compared to when I was 18. It's a completely different world, and it's not like at 18 you can get away with it in a healthy way. It still actually negatively impacts your body, but you have a greater resiliency capacity that it doesn't bother you as much. But if there's one thing that I wish more, there's actually more than one thing, but one of the things I wish pre-med hopefuls, those who want to become physicians really do consider is understanding that the way that you've experienced life so far, where you can just bounce back and working hard is not a big deal and not sleeping a lot and just grinding all the time, understand that that is gonna change as you get older because it becomes harder to do that day in and day out.
You feel like you got hit by a car or like a zombie. There were times where like my body physically hurt, and it's not like I was working out or anything like that. We were required to do sometimes 5 a month or 8 a month, and honestly, it kills you. It really catches up to you.
I remember one time I had just finished a shift. I think I had been working for about 32 hours or so, and there was no sleep. It was just a busy call night. We were probably on triple call. Face, hand, plastics. So anytime there's a call for any of those 3, they call our team, whereas sometimes, ENT or OMFS is sharing face call, and ortho can also share hand call. So anyways, it was just a busy night, and I am starving because I haven't eaten in however many hours, and I go to pick up Thai food, and in the parking lot, I'm reversing in my little Scion FRS, and it's still like, when I drive, it's a very active process. It's a manual transmission vehicle, so like, you're still kind of aware of what's going on. But then I stop all of a sudden and almost hit the car behind me because somehow I blanked out or whatever. And at that moment I was like, this is just not safe. Being awake for this long, being this sleep deprived is just not safe. And you don't want those people operating on you or taking care of you in the hospital. But that's what we do to our physicians.
I didn't want to look back at my life when I was in my 50s or 60s and regret not having more time to actually do things that I loved, because not getting enough sleep was really catching up to me. That leads me to my second reason as to why I quit my job, and that was my mental health. Like I mentioned, I reached a point where I didn't recognize myself, and I had family members, friends, and my husband commenting on how I was changing, how my mood was changing, how I was more short-fused, how I didn't want to leave the couch, I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. And that is not who I am.
Yeah, these are telltale signs of burnout.
Almost at times, like I was viewing myself from this like outside perspective and just
Dissociation.
seeing me kind of just mosey around through life, but not actually being happy. I was also studying for oral boards at that time, which oral boards are something that you have to take to become a board certified OBGYN, which thank God I passed, yay to me. That was really good news, but preparing for that exam on top of working all of these crazy shifts, delivering so many babies and just being so overworked, 2022 was really tough.
So for those who don't know, oral boards, you do that soon after residency, and that's how you kind of close out your training, and now you're board certified in that specialty. So your board exam for OBGYN is obviously gonna be different than your board exam for internal medicine and so on. But the overall process is quite similar.
I had to take a minute to step back and say, no more, something has to change. I reached my breaking point in January of 2023 after the craziest shift I ever had in my entire life. When we worked on the weekends, there were 2 doctors on call. One would do 24s on Friday, Sunday, and one would do 24s on Saturday. It was my turn to do a Friday, Sunday, 24-hour shifts, which I absolutely hated. And between those 2 days, I delivered 18 babies. I did not sleep on Friday, and I did not sleep on Sunday. By Sunday at around 4 o'clock in the morning, I realized that something had to change. A part of me was breaking. I was struggling. Shortly thereafter, I resigned. The other reason why I quit is that I simply had other passions in my life and I just didn't want to be a working slave to this job.
So kudos to Ali. You know, I do think it takes a lot of courage to quit and to be very open about your decision. My understanding is that she's still practicing as an OBGYN in a different practice setting. And I also want to just clear up for the viewers that, you know, private practice oftentimes can be challenging, especially if you're starting it from scratch. You know, she's joining a practice which can also be very busy, especially if they're influenced by some of these market factors or are getting bought up by PE firms. But generally speaking, private practice oftentimes does have a more challenging lifestyle. Not always, but oftentimes does. You generally get a higher compensation with that. So a lot of younger physicians like to go into private practice, and by the time they get older, they might still be in the private practice, but now they have more ownership stake and some equity, and they don't have to work as hard because there's systems and there's other physicians who are working in that private practice underneath them. But I have other friends in private practices in other specialties, and they have a great lifestyle. So you can't just look at one practice setting and say it's all good or it's all bad or it's all busy or it's all slow.
I reached a point with that job where I was more sad and unsatisfied than I was happy. And I knew there were other opportunities available to me, so why not explore those options?
So the cool thing here with medicine is that you can choose the path, you can choose the gig that fits your needs and your lifestyle and your desires best. So some of you may love neurosurgery and you want to live and breathe neurosurgery and just 120 hours a week neurosurgery, and if that's you, awesome. But a lot of other people, like Ali here, they want to have more balanced lifestyles, and I think a lot of people in my generation and the younger generations, they want a more balanced lifestyle, and there's no shame in that. So you can find that lifestyle that suits you best. I have some friends who are working for Kaiser as an example, because Kaiser gives you a very good lifestyle, you're making decent income, there's not as much stress versus doing something like private practice, and it works well for those who want to have a balanced lifestyle. I actually have another friend who might be a guest on this channel to talk about this experience, where he's starting his own private practice because he didn't like feeling like a cog in this mega corp wheel in family medicine. And now he's looking at starting his own concierge practice, and there's pros and cons with that too. But the cool thing here is that you can find and tailor a practice based on what you want.
Now I have much more time to dive into my passions, to continue with YouTube, to maybe write a book, to maybe start a podcast, to travel more, to, I don't know, literally do what I want to do. And my final reason why I decided to leave were changes that were going on in the office setting. I mentioned at the beginning of the video, in private practice, you work in an office where you see patients. So when I first signed and joined that group, it was physician-owned. Then after a year of working there, that was sold by a corporation. This is something that's happening.
See, I called that earlier. It was probably a PE firm.
Where a lot of big corporations and businesses are buying out private practices, and that can cause a lot of issues. I wish I had a solution as to how we could fix this whole problem with medicine and healthcare in the United States, how we can get rid of 24-hour calls, how we can get rid of these businesses telling doctors how to do their job, because they're not clinicians, they didn't go to medical school, They're not licensed, yet they can dictate our schedules and how we work, and it can become very frustrating.
There's definitely an issue when you have non-doctors telling doctors how to do their job, because there's a big disconnect in terms of understanding what it takes to provide quality patient care.
Some patients, some of you, wait months to see a doctor, and you are only allotted 5 or 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes to sit with them. And that is not okay with me. That is not the type of medicine that I want to practice. A 10-minute visit, sure, it might work for a woman who's on her 5th pregnancy, who's completely healthy, who's done this 4 other times, but God forbid they have a couple questions. You need to know your patient. You need to meet them and let them feel comfortable. Let them get to know you, because what we do is very intimate.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point for OB-GYN to not rush it, because you're doing a very intimate physical exam as well. So squeezing shorter and shorter patient visits allows you to see more patients in a day, more revenue, but obviously the patient care is suffering.
Let's just say I was always running behind in the office. This again was not sustainable. There were a lot of positive aspects of my job, and I don't want you to think like this was like a super easy decision for me to make, because trust me, I went back and forth in this forever. The number one reason why I did not want to leave my job was my patients. It's just, you form such a strong bond that it was really, really hard for me to make that decision. I felt like I was letting people down by quitting. You reach a point where when you don't recognize who you are anymore and you just are faking it till you make it, it's not okay. And it's okay to put yourself first in that instance. But I also feel this like weight has come off of my shoulders and I feel much more free.
Hell yeah.
But it's
good for her.
But again, when I sat down and actually looked at my life and what I wanted out of my life, this was just not a job that I wanted.
Really important point Ali raised here. You got to put on your own oxygen mask on first, because if you are guilting yourself into thinking that you need to do this for your patients or for your community, but you're unhappy and you're miserable and you're not providing the best quality care that you can, you actually would be better off quitting, finding a different gig, and then giving it your all there. You owe it to yourself to put yourself in the circumstances and in the position where you can actually thrive and be happy and do your best work and feel the best about yourself too. All right, big congrats to Ali. Let me know what you think of her decision with a comment down below. Did I miss anything? Do you agree, disagree? We're seeing a lot of these videos of doctors quitting their jobs in medicine and taking on other roles, and I'd like to hear your thoughts as to why that may be. Go show Ali some love, check out her channel linked below, and I'll see you all in the next one.